When we talk about pensions, the real question is, why do pensions matter? The problem that we're tackling is old age poverty, especially if you think of it in two dimensions. One, our retirees. Broad-based inclusive pensions, while they prevent old age poverty, they more importantly allow a retired labor force to live a life with dignity. Pensions are critical in achieving long-term financial resilience and independence. If you marry this with financial inclusion is only an enabler to achieving a dignified quality life. Pensions are an answer to financial inclusion for what? It is one of the very many answers of what the role of financial inclusion in people's lives are. The second dimension to think of pensions would be for governments. Having a large population that is unable to support themselves is a big social and political issue. Governments across the world, even those in African markets with largely dominant young working populations, have realized that in the next 2 decades, they're going to face a huge fiscal burden in terms of social protection payments, so like G2P payments or basic income payments for large segments of the population, in particular for women. And if they don't address the exclusion, especially of large informal workers, pension exclusion, it is going to create a lot bigger and longer term social and political issue. For somebody like me who's worked on financial inclusion, especially digital financial services, for a very long time, and the role of financial inclusion is enablement so that people can live healthy, long lives in a manner that helps them achieve upward mobility, but also long-term financial resilience. And pensions is a method to that.
Well, if you had asked me 10 years ago if an enabling ecosystem exists across the 54 African markets, I would have responded maybe and possibly mixed. Today, however, with the explosion of digital payments, interoperability of payments, a dense cash in, cash out infrastructure, which is the fundamental rails of the pension train ecosystem, I would say we are on the way to have broad-based inclusive digital pensions. If you need a functioning railway train system, the fundamental infrastructure would be the rails. In this case, this is the payment infrastructure. And pension trains are only going to run and can only reach to the extent that the rails exist. If rails don't extend to villages or districts, then pension infrastructure stops where the rails are. So the inclusiveness and broad basing of pensions is extremely dependent on a trustworthy and seamless payment infrastructure, which we have seen in multiple African countries rapidly evolving. That said, there are certain gaps that regulators and private sector actors will have to tackle in the coming years to ensure retention and customer trust in pension markets. Number one would be regulatory collaboration. This particularly relates to the mechanics of how pension regulators that normally regulate all aspects regarding pension schemes, its administration and execution, will now have to work with central banks that have supervision and oversight of payment systems and national ID authorities as well. The second would be enabling infrastructure and execution. In some African jurisdictions, there are very prescriptive-based regulations when it comes to pensions. And therefore, some of these regulations that were written and designed at a time where the explosion of payments were not envisaged, they will have to rework how payments and how payment infrastructure, including the channels, customer acquisition, paying methods, payout methods, marketing, distribution, etc., is thought through in order to achieve pension ambitions in a country. The third one that we are all, and including me as a consumer, is looking forward to is the evolution of business models. When you have such a transformative and revolutionary change in financial services, what invariably happens is customer demand and their expectations change. And therefore, there will be a redesign of business models everywhere from customer acquisition to pay in, pay out of pensions to across the lifespan of a customer. The pinBox project, from my perspective, is an extremely necessary catalyst towards fostering dialogue among various actors responsible for designing and delivering an inclusive pension system in country. And number two, enabling cross-border, cross-country, especially regional economies like the EAC, SADC, West African Monetary Union, cross-regional blocks from learning between regulators and private sectors, which enable not just broad-based pension. Like on the African continent, there is so much migration that happens that this project will help us think through labor market movements and how we think about portability, how we think about the changing norms and expectation of both men and women in the labor market force and as they exit the labor market.